So let's dive into this. We may not have a clickbait, but I think we've got some excellent content here to review. Now, we know going into round one last year, I think if you had done a poll, it was kind of widely known, it was unanimous that the Lions were in need of a cornerback, needed a defensive back. Going into day one, the Lions were projected to pick at number 29. We know that Brad Holmes eventually traded up with the Dallas Cowboys, moved up from 29 to 24 to select Alabama cornerback Terrion Arnold. Now, some draft analysts viewed Terrion as the number one corner in the entire draft. Others had Quinyon Mitchell, but it was 1A and 1B in most cases. Brad Holmes, after the first round, when he did his post-draft press conference, he said, "I don't want to say speechless, but overly thrilled how tonight went. It happened to match up the best football player on our board and was an area where we wanted to add a cornerback at some point." Tim Twentyman wrote an article, and he highlighted that a big appeal of Terrion Arnold for the Lions was his ability to track and find the football. And Twentyman also pointed out that Terrion led the SEC in both passes defended, he had 17, and interceptions, he had 5. He also chipped in 63 tackles, 6.5 which were for loss, as well as defended more passes, 26, than games played in his college career, which was 25. So, Will, I'm going to ask you, we have 1 year now of data. What do you think about Brad's decision to trade up from 29 to 24? How do you feel Terrion Arnold played his rookie year, and would you have done anything different than the decision that Brad Holmes ultimately made in trading up and selecting Terrion Arnold?
In the first round, the Lions took Terrion Arnold at pick 24. There have been some shots that have been fired at Terrion and Brad Holmes this offseason so far that I've heard. There's been fans of the Detroit Lions that are saying that they've made mistakes, that Brad Holmes should have never taken Terrion Arnold, should have taken an edge rusher or a linebacker. And I think that's where I'm going to dive in, is let's compare Terrion to some of the other options, and then I'll give you my final take at the end. And I think that's where I'm going to start here, is with Terrion's stats. So Terrion had a productive season. He got off on a rocky start with some penalties. Now, it may shock you that he only had 11 penalties on the season. Only. That's a ton. He cannot have 11 penalties next year, and he won't. Now, the one thing I didn't look up, which maybe you could do while I'm doing this, Riley, is when did Terrion get the bulk of these penalties? And I'm going to guess it was before week 6, week 7, is when he had the majority of his 11 penalties. There was maybe 2 or 3 after that. And the reason why that's important, because as a rookie, you're learning. And from day one, he was getting flagged after flag after flag. And you know what? A lot of them didn't make sense. But it also, I think, honed in Terrion Arnold's ability to say, okay, I get it now. I see what the refs are calling. I need to play a little bit differently. But he didn't really play differently. He was always hip to hip the majority of the time. He was always in a position to drop a receiver where they stood, where they caught the ball. And those, to me, are far and away a better measurement of a rookie's ability and talent level than saying he got some penalties, he's not that good. Well, if he wasn't in the area to make that play, and that play was going for more yards, then you'd be really pissed off. And so I'm glad that he was there to make a play and try to go after the ball. And the key stat that you pointed out, I didn't even realize this. He had 26 passes defensed in college in 25 games. Tell me another corner that is able to come up with a PBU every single game, and sometimes more than one in a game. That's an incredible feat. That just tells you that his vision, his instincts, is exactly why Brad took him. But we'll get to that. So 11 penalties, of which 3 were holding, 7 were pass interference, and he had 1 that was an other penalty. I'm not sure what it was. He had 1,023 snaps in 2024. So out of a total of 1,095 snaps, he played 94% of the snaps this season. And this is mostly regular season stats that I'm giving you. His best game, in my opinion, was Week 18 versus the Vikings. Hands down, best game I've seen out of Terrion all season. 74.1. Yes, we will use PFF for this because, or for part of this. There's like 8 different stat companies that I use, and they're part of this. So 74.1 grade in that game. That was his best grade of the season, and he covered none other than Justin Jefferson on a large majority of his assignments. And I think that that's huge because Justin didn't have a good game at all. Neither did Jordan Addison. But you know what? Neither did Sam Darnold. He didn't have a great game either. So maybe if Sam Darnold was on and he was more pinpoint with his throws, maybe it's a different story. But it wasn't. Stats per PFR, Pro Football Reference, would say that he only missed 4.8% of his tackles. That's 3. He missed 3 tackles the entire season. He had 17 stops. He had a 55.6 completion rate against. He had 9 pass breakups on the season. So, won every other game. Pretty good as a rookie. Passer rating allowed, 93.7. I would love to see that lower, especially in the second season. I think that number has to be driven down into the 70s. I would be cool with. I think that would be a much better passer rating for him. Mind you, being the number 2 corner for the Lions, he was going to get a lot of the targets anyway. He was targeted a lot. He started 16 to 17 games. I don't know why he didn't start a game midway through the season. I don't know if it was to injuries. It might have been to injuries. He might have been hurt. Coming back off, I think he might have been coming back off of off a game where they didn't start him, and then he went in because they wanted just to see he was going to be okay, right? Now that included the postseason, of course, or did not include the postseason. 16 to 17 games. He averaged 3.5 yards of yak. Again, that's a pretty damn good number. You're not letting guys go for more than 3.5 yards beyond their catch. That's pretty good. Now, what did the Lions give up to get Terrion Arnold? I guess that's the biggest question. Was it worth what we gave up? Well, the Lions gave up a first-round pick, number 29, and a third-round pick, number 73. In exchange, they got pick number 24 and a round 7 pick in 2025. Somewhere around the 210s, probably, from the Cowboys. Now, who did the Cowboys pick with those picks? Well, they got Tyler Guyton, who had a terrible season, and Cooper Beebe. I don't even know if he played. Now, Terry didn't have the breakout season that we wished or wanted for, but I think that there's more to this story, and it should tell you that his season by any means was not terrible. And I said from the very beginning of this year that Terrion was going to have his mistakes. Don't get down on the guy. Because if you get down on the guy and you infect his, emotions, right? You infect his confidence, that's just going to make it way worse. And you know what? I didn't see a ton of hate going his way. Now, I'm not all over social media like everybody else is, but I didn't see a ton. I didn't see a lot of articles that were negative. I didn't see a lot of videos that were negative. Everyone just kind of laid off Terrion to a degree. And that was the smart move because his confidence remained, and he felt like every day he could go out and make a play. Now, what were the other options that were available other than Terrion? And this is where we're going to start to get into, did it make sense? The hottest name that was floated around was Nate Wiggins. Now, he was the absolute next cornerback off the board, pick 30 of the first round. And I know what you're thinking already, but, Nate Wiggins' grade is better. And his weekly performance was better than Terrion Arnold's on most games. So Brad Holmes completely missed on this pick. And that is why PFF is good for just about nothing on the majority of days that it's good for. It's good. It gives you a good snapshot, but you have to dig deeper. You have to watch tape. You have to understand the stats and figure out what they're looking at, because not every time is it going to make sense. It's just not. So here are the facts that I know to be true right now about Nate Wiggins. He had 9 penalties. Terrion had 11. Well, I don't think that 2 more penalties is that big of a deal. Well, 3 of those were for holding. Well, 3 of Terrion's were for holding. 3 of them were for PI to Terrion's 7, so he beat Terrion in that game. But he also had 1 for incidental contact, and 1 for offsides, and 1 for, what's UR? I don't know what that one is. But anyway, he had 9, of which 7 of those penalties were just like a holding, illegal contact, or pass interference, to Terrion Arnold's penalties, which he had 10. So 7 to 10. I don't think 3 penalties are going to make or break your season. So Nate Wiggins, just as bad. But here's the kicker. Nate also did it on like a third less snaps. Terrion had 1,023 snaps, and Nate Wiggins had 769. He only played in 67.9% of the total snaps that the Baltimore defense played in that season. Now, his best game, coincidentally, was also Week 18 versus the Browns. He was targeted 5 times. He only allowed 2 catches for a 40% catch rate and had a pick 6 in that game. Well, there's the underlying factor, right? A lot of people are saying, well, he didn't get any picks. Terrion didn't get any picks all season. But Nate did, and he got a pick 6. He must be better than Terrion Arnold. All right, let's compare this. Missed tackles. Nate Wiggins was 10.8% missed tackles. Terrion Arnold, 4.8. I'd rather have a guy that can tackle. Terrion had 17 stops. Nate Wiggins had 11. Now, mind you, that missed tackle percentage is also on a lower snap count, so that tells you that he's missing more tackles than what Terrion is. 50% completion percentage or completion rate for Wiggins, 55.6 for Arnold. I don't think 5.6% is going to make or break a season for anybody. Now, if you're talking 10, 12, 13, 14%, that's in a different category. Much different category. 8 pass breakups for Nate Wiggins. Terrion had 9. Passer rating against, again, for Terrion Arnold was 93.7. Nate Wiggins, 66.7. So he had a much better passer rating than Terrion Arnold. But who did Wiggins guard mostly? Who did he defend? Well, it clearly wasn't the number ones. All right, you had Marlon Humphrey in there and others. They had to switch around that Baltimore defense quite a bit because it wasn't even a factor for Nate Wiggins in the beginning of the season because he didn't play. He didn't start in the beginning. He didn't start until after week 4. He started 8 of 17 games, including 2 in the postseason, which meant he only started 6 games in the regular season. Again, these stats are Pro Football Reference. He missed 2 games, week 2 and 8. Terrion didn't miss any. And his average was 3.39 yards per catch for yak yards. So right in line with Terrion Arnold. Now, the defensive rankings for Baltimore, overall, when I look at, what did they have over there? Marlon Humphrey was the number 4 ranked overall cornerback on the season. An 83.9 coverage grade. So he was the most elite corner they had, clearly playing, guarding, defending the number 1 receivers. Obviously, Nate Wiggins is going to get more opportunity, right? He's going to get targeted a little bit more because he's not going up against the number 1s. When I look at other, and we'll talk about this, I know Riley will bring some things up. When we look at other corners, how does Terrion Arnold stack up with his rookie season versus others, in the last few seasons? And we're going to talk about that. But here's where I want to go next is, why was Wiggins not a fit for Detroit? I don't know if everybody really pays attention to the things that I try to pay attention to when I evaluate a player. The first thing I'm looking at is, do they fit? I don't care about their culture. I don't care about their identity. I don't care about any of that stuff in the beginning. In the beginning, it's tape. Are you running the same defense that we're currently running? Do you fit? Because if you don't even check that box, it's harder for you to cross over and learn new things as a rookie and have a great season. Clemson ran a 4-2-5 hybrid scheme. Lions also ran a 4-2-5 at times, but that was not their traditional. They ran out of the 4-3 base. We ran out of the 4-2-5 in the nickel very few times compared to what I think that we should have been in. But that'll also tell you, which means that Clemson primarily relied on a zone defensive scheme, not a man defensive scheme. They didn't even frequently use a man scheme at all. They would likely, however, incorporate some man schemes and elements that were situational depending, on which opponent or game scenario they had that week. Of course, they would have some man involved, but it's not their primary look. Their primary look was having 5 DBs on the field, not 4, 5. Wiggins seemed to excel in off-man coverage. I clipped a whole bunch of video that I was going to play for you, but then I decided not to because I'm going to put it into a regular video. That way I know if it gets taken down, I don't care. He was in off-man coverage in way more than he's not. Let's just put it that way. It's probably 70-30. He's in off-man coverage, more than 5 yards, oftentimes more than 7 yards. That fits into the Ravens' defensive style, as the Ravens run a 3-4 defense, which gives them more coverage in the middle of the field and faster coverage with outside linebackers that can actually cover. The Ravens were in 3-4 or cover 6. So they were in cover 3 or 4 or 6 more than 70% of the plays that they called in 2024. So let's talk about Nate Wiggins' pick 6 for a moment. Go watch the video for yourself. During a Browns offensive play, it was a pick play. Wiggins was in a zone on a choice route between either Elijah Moore or Jerry Jeudy. Bailey Zapp here. Come on, Bailey threw the pick 6 ball. He threw it right in the middle of the receivers. One going one way, one going the other. Nate Wiggins right there. Basically threw it right into his hands. Wiggins put himself into a good position. He did. He made a nice jump, but this was a badly thrown ball, and the receivers were not even close. They weren't looking. Had he been, up against a professional NFL team, not the Browns, this doesn't happen. Not trying to take anything away from the kid, but I'm just saying that there's more to this than meets the eye. So why did Brad Holmes make the right choice here? Or did he? Well, back in mid-November, the Ravens had one of the worst passing defenses. The tape and the numbers do not lie. When in cover 2, 3, or 4, or cover 6 in 2024, the Ravens allowed a league-high 16 attempts of 20 or more air yards, over the entire league. A league-high 28 targets for 534 yards. Only the Indianapolis Colts allowed more. A league-high 4 touchdowns, tied with the Los Angeles Rams and the Houston Texans. No interceptions taken away. A league worst passer rating of 141.4. That's damn near perfect. You're 13.4 points away from being perfect, or 12.4 points away from being perfect. And a league worst passer EPA allowed of plus 32.32. So that tells me right there, probably made the right choice. But you can't blame the entire passing defense on one guy, Nate Wiggins, can you? I mean, Marlon Humphrey was the number 4 overall rated corner in this league this year. But Wiggins didn't play early, like I said earlier. It took until the defense being that terrible, right, through the first several weeks of the season. And against, the pass, I mean, they were bottoms of the league. And then three DBs, go to IR. I think 2 in August and then 1 more during the season. And he finally got some meaningful playing time. Whereas Terrion started from day 1. Now, he was a full-time starter after week 4, but he still didn't log full-time starter reps. He played in about 2/3 of the reps that were available. Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, they were the starters. Jalen Davis went down before week 4. They lost their starting nickel back before October 1st. And that moved Humphrey to nickel. And then starting left corner is where Wiggins took over. So the question is man versus zone and personnel groupings. Why man scheme corners make sense? A man-on-man. This is why Brad made the right decision. We run a lot of man. A man-on-man defense scheme helps shut down offenses by allowing the defense to focus on guarding specific offensive players with their best defenders, effectively limiting the impact of the opponent's most skilled players and forcing them to work harder to get open shots. Thus, it just really disrupts the offensive flow and it creates more difficult scoring opportunities. So Brad made the right choice. He brought in a guy that he knew was going to fit. And he knew he was going to fit well because he was a type of a corner that was a man style of corner that excelled in man. If you can excel in man, you have a better opportunity at doing much better and excelling in off man when needed to, be in a zone.
The other aspect of this, Will, and I'd like your thoughts on this, because as I, can read off stats from Sauce Gardner and Pat Surtain, that's all good and well, but we have to remember the bulk of the Lions starting defense by week 18, when Terrion had his best game of the season, was out with injury. How much better would his rookie season have been if the unit as a whole was still intact, right? If you still had Aiden Hutchinson, if you still had a Lee McNeil out there.
I think that's a big part of it.
Absolutely.
I think that when so people in the chat have said things, well, certain teams had, better pass rush and they had more sacks. And I get it. How many of those are coverage sacks? How many of those are coverage sacks by the Ravens or by the Eagles or by the Chiefs or by the Broncos? By the Broncos. Think about it. Pat Surtain, one of the best corners out there, and the Broncos led the league in sacks. That's not a mystery.
Right. Yeah.
That is not a mystery. And I hate that some people discredit the backfield, the DBs, the secondary, and they just want to address the front end. Look, you get the best 4 defensive linemen in the league on the team. And guess what? You're going to get the same result unless you have a, complementary DB room that can hold. Because it's been said time and time again, it's been tracked over and over and over. Quarterbacks have at least 2.5 seconds to get rid of the ball. And it is very infrequent that even the best top 10 edge, top 10 DTs in the league, their average sack time is 3 seconds or more. If you give a quarterback 2.5 seconds, he's going to dice you up.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Jared Goff is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of them. And he doesn't even have wheels. He's got broken giraffe legs. And he's able to stand in the pocket and deliver in 2.5 seconds. Yeah. He's still going to get the ball out. And if you don't have a secondary that can hold up and give your edge time to work, because these are also professional athletes on the offensive line, unless they're third stringers that you're going up against, your first and second string can more often than not hold it down. And it's not very frequent that your offensive line goes down where it's totally depleted across the line. If you're 75 or 70% intact across the offensive line, you're doing pretty good. If you lose both tackles, yeah, you're going to be in some trouble. But it doesn't happen a whole lot. And even if it does, we have seen where our own defense has had trouble against third and fourth string tackles. Obviously, Aiden had the majority of his sacks this season against one team that had third string tackles in. So there's that, right? You can get a bunch of sacks. What did they do? Were they meaningful? You still need to have a very good secondary. And I want to say the number was about 60% that the Lions were in man. So just thinking about that, I mean, if you're in man the majority of the time, we see the Lions in man usually on first down, right? And if it's third and long at some point, I mean, yeah, they're pinning their ears and they're going, right? They're not going to take a chance. They're going to blitz. We blitzed like 54% of the time or 55% of the time. And it's just crazy that when you're blitzing that much, you're leaving your corners on an island. Anyway, we kind of got off a little bit. So your question was, how much different of a situation would it have been defensively, you know, had the Lions been healthy? And I think that is a big part of this. I think that you have to look at every scenario with a team and their rookies and how they perform. But I would say even without here's where I'm more impressed. I'm more impressed that Terrion had this good of a season with such a banged up defense. He watched all of his guys that he went to war with in the summer go down. And for the most part, everyone that stayed healthy was in the DB room until like the last 4 games. And then Carlton goes down, and then Amik goes down. And the fact that he gave up, what was it, 3.3 yards on 4 catches in the divisional round?
Yep.
He's the only one out there, right? You had Kirby, and I mean, Dorsey's gone. We had Vildor. They attacked the hell out of Vildor. But yeah, I'm more impressed. So let's talk about this for a second. So who was after Terrion that would have made sense, right? Who's after Terrion? And let me go to the draft result. Keep on swallowing like crazy this morning. All the medicine they gave me, man, yesterday really screwed me up. Let's go to the draft result here. So first round, Lions are at 24. They take Terrion Arnold, right? Now after Terrion Arnold, they had Jordan Morgan. Well, he didn't even play this season, really. Graham Barton, I know he had injury issues. And then he was pegged to be the center this season for the Bucs. Had a decent season. Darius Robinson, he was hurt. I mean, he was high on just about every Lions roster as far as, you know, who we wanted for an edge rusher. He was high on mine, but I didn't expect the Lions to go edge. And matter of fact, I posted my draft notes on the community chat because I saved that stuff for a reason because I like to review it once in a while, but I called it, you know, that we were going after a corner. So Darius Robinson had a terrible season. Xavier Worthy, so there's a receiver. Did we need a receiver? Not really. Tyler Guyton, terrible season. I don't even know that he played for the Cowboys really a whole lot. I don't think he did. Matter of fact, let's see.
The one that sticks out to me, and I mentioned it, would have been DeJean, who went number 40 to Philadelphia. Again, you mentioned a receiver. I guess you could have, I mean, you'd have loved to see like a Ladd McConkey on the Detroit Lions, but again, it wasn't as big of a need. And McConkey.
Well, there's two things. There's 2 things with Brad Holmes. He says that he does not draft needs. He only drafts best player available. Best football player on his board is what he drafts. So that's why I would never expect him to go for a need. He takes care of the needs in free agency. Let me back up for a second. Darius Robinson. If we were to regrade and kind of take a look at the first round draft picks, he had a injury-riddled rookie year. And he appeared on 184 snaps the whole season. And out of 120 of those snaps, this is where I think that this is a better stat for him, even though some people would think differently. Out of 120 pass rushing opportunities that he had 2 pressures. That's it. 2 pressures. I don't know how many sacks he had. I don't know if he had any. I didn't go as deep into him because, I mean, that is a guy that we would have loved to have had on the edge, right? I just don't think that it was a need once you looked at the fact that we already had Davenport. So we knew that the Lions weren't going to go edge. They were going to backfill with everybody that they already had. He had 1 sack. So he had 1 sack on the season. He only played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. He saw the field, 184 snaps. He had 1 sack. So if I were to do the math, you know, most defenses, let's just say they see 1,200 snaps. You divide that by 184. That means that he would have had about 6.5 sacks in his rookie year if he played a full season. Maybe he would add a few more in there. So he would have probably been a decent rookie, right? He probably could have been much better prepared had he, you know, been working with the Lions. But we'll never know. Then there's, after that, you have no receiver makes sense. I'm not even going to talk about them. Offensive line didn't make sense. Not even going to talk about them. Nate Wiggins, I've already talked about. So you have Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette. I mean, there's nobody after him in the first round that makes any sense. So let's skip to the second round. Who would you have brought up out of the second round? Keon Coleman? Again, Lad McConkey? No. How about Rook Ororo? How about Rookie? I loved Rookie. I thought that Rook was going to be one of the best, bright, shiny draft pieces of this draft. And I still think he will, but I think he's also a little bit raw. He's going to take a little bit of time, and that's okay. I would have taken him all day long, but not over Terrion Arnold. We needed a plug-and-play guy for day one. He missed like the first 4 weeks, then he missed like the middle 4 weeks, or 5 weeks, or 7 weeks, whatever it was. And he only got a handful of games. He had 0 sacks, 6 tackles. Not a good season. Not a good season. But you know what? I expect this dude to shine. I bet you Rook is going to be, he's going to be balling in his second year, as long as he stays healthy. All right, how about Drazon Newton? We needed a defensive tackle. That is one guy that I would have taken. That is one guy that I would have taken in the first round. But again, the question is, would I have taken him over Terrion Arnold? Unequivocally, no. I wouldn't have. Now, he had a decent season. He played in just about every game, right? I mean, excellent year for Washington. Obviously, he's behind, some really good defensive front athletes over in Washington. His scores were terrible. I mean, just absolutely terrible on the season. The conference championship game, that was his best game, believe it or not. That was his best game of the year. Didn't get any sacks, but that was his best game score-wise. He had 2 sacks on the season. He had 23 tackles, like 16 hurries. 23 total pressures, 2 sacks, 16 hurries. So, good season, not great. But again, when you look at the defense that we already had assembled, we had DJ Reader signed. We're not bringing in a DT. I mean, you got to read the tea leaves, right? If Brad Holmes has already settled this up in free agency, you're not going to be taking those players in the draft. At least not right away, other than when it came to the corner position. Because again, you get into a situation like this year, where you don't have anybody signed. So we knew that he was going to go young. There was no reason not to go young. And again, the roster roulette that I put together speaks to all that. And so far, it's been spot on. Okay, so who after that? In the second round? Where'd my second round just go?
Yeah, it's only one name that stands out to me. I guess maybe I know you like a certain player that went number 42 to Houston.
So Braden Fisk, that is a guy that I would have brought in. But again, I can't say that I would have brought him in over Terrion. Cooper DeJean, look, I was not high on him. I said that he wasn't going to be a first-round pick. Everyone had him as the best corner in the draft. He's having a good season. I do like his play, and I like his hard-nosed football style. I just don't think he fits the style of defense that we play, even though this dude is just, I mean, he's as vicious as they come back there. And he can flip-flop corner or safety, and I love that versatility. But when I think you look at a corner like Terrion Arnold that has, in my opinion, the best attributes, and I'm not just saying this because I said that Terrion was going to be our pick, but I'm saying this because when you look at his attributes as a player and his confidence and his attitude and the grit factor, the culture, right? I mean, how he was brought up and just what he embodies as a human, as a person. This dude clearly was the right pick. There's nobody else except for Kamari Lassiter. Kamari Lassiter would have been my only other choice. Hindsight 2020. Kamari Lassiter. All the other guys that I mentioned and talked about, I had them much higher on my board as potential first-round fits. I knew we were taking a corner. But Kamari was not on my list. As he just wasn't. Not that early. The Texans stole this dude. Now, maybe he had a really lucky first season, but Kamari Lassiter, in my opinion, is amazing. Let me touch on Sauce Gardner for a minute, because Sauce has been lauded as one of the best, if not the best corner in the NFL right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
2022, his first season in the NFL, he scored a PFF 87.9. His second season in 88.6. And his third season, 70.2. Terrion's grade was better this year. So let's take a look at his grade. I'm sorry, his performance in 2024. How many interceptions did he get?
1, was it?
I don't know why this is not blowing up nice and big for me. Everything is like hidden. And this is on a huge screen. I don't what's up with PFF today? Tackling, coverage, interceptions. So this year he had 2. So Terrion has 0. Sauce has 2. And he's the best corner in the league. Interceptions don't make you the best corner. He had 14 passes broken up. Sauce Gardner did. How many did Terrion have? 11?
Let's see.
Terrion had...
What I do know is Terrion played the
9.
most... Yeah, he had the most snaps at the cornerback position on a team that won 15 games.
That's because not a lot of teams win 15 games. So, 9 pass breakups to Sauce Gardner's 14. I mean, I'm not saying that Terrion's better than Sauce. But what I'm saying is when you look at the stats, right, sometimes the stats overweighs the play on the field to some people. That's why you have to look at both. And this more makes me feel better about Terrion Arnold when I look at his 2022 season. That's what we're talking about right now, his 2022 season. Sauce Gardner had 2 interceptions, 14 pass breakups, a 53.5 passer rating against. Terrion had a 93.7. But Sauce Gardner wasn't targeted at all. That's why he was, they were saying like he was having a bad season because nobody was throwing the ball at him. He got targeted hot and early, and then it slimmed down through the middle of the season. I mean, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games out of his first season that he was targeted 4 times or less in a game. 4 times or less. So he wasn't targeted. So he had 73 targets, 33 catches, 45.2 reception rate to Terrion's 54? 55.6. So yeah, he's 10% better. He didn't allow a few extra, receptions, but here's the difference. You spoke to it earlier. What about the rest of the defense?
Mm-hmm.
The Jets have had a top 4 defense in 2022. They had a top 4 defense this year, and they had a top 10 defense in 2023. And it's not just the corners. He also had DJ Reed, right? Who's also a top 10 corner working alongside him. So there's the difference. Now, Carlton Davis was a top 26 this year. Meek Robertson was a top 28 this year. So we had some pretty good guys working, but we didn't have a top 10, right? We didn't have a top 10 working. Well, we had a couple of good safeties. Put it this way. Does Kirby Joseph have the season he has without Terrion and Carlton doing what they're doing? Absolutely not.
It's a great point.
So Kirby took all the interceptions for everybody.
Yep.
They put him in the position to win.
Yeah.
By manning down their man, left Kirby open to play the field. All right, enough on Terrion. We could go into this all day because we went deep into this. Like Quinion Mitchell, I think you touched on. What about Devon Witherspoon? So he was my pick last year. And last year I said that Devon Witherspoon was going to be our guy unless he got snatched at number 5, and he did. Then I said the Lions were going to pivot. They were going to trade back to 12, and they were going to take Jahmyr Gibbs, and it all came true. And it was all put on tape well before the draft. So Devon Witherspoon, what did he do in his rookie year? Let's take a look. So Devon Witherspoon as a rookie, he had 1 interception. He allowed 4 TDs. He had an 87.6 passer rating against. Again, Terrion Arnold had a 93.7, so very close. He allowed 174 yards of yak on 39 receptions, so that's going to be very close to what Terrion Arnold did, right around 4 yards a catch of yak. Pass breakups, he had 10. Terrion had 9. Very similar season of what Devon Witherspoon had his rookie year to what Terrion Arnold had. So here's at my end of the day, here's my take on Terrion Arnold. We can't cry over spilled milk because we didn't get an edge rusher. Okay, put it to bed. We can't judge or evaluate. I hate the word judge. I don't know why I even say it. We can't evaluate Terrion Arnold against anybody else but rookies and what they did in their rookie season. Being a rookie corner is one of the hardest positions in the league, next to tight end and center and quarterback. Those are like the 3-4 top, hardest positions in the league. And in my opinion, and many others, is safety, corner, tight end, center, quarterback. Those are your top positions. And if you ask anybody what is the hardest position, oftentimes they're going to say it's center and tight end because they have to know so much. Like the tight ends have to know all of the calls and all of the route tree. That's really tough to do as a rookie. But a corner on an island, having to go up against these guys, running at them 1,000 miles per hour and having to know all these calls and where to be and all the shifts and all the motions. I mean, they have to know it all and not be able to communicate. I mean, they're not able to communicate with each other. It's all hand signals, body language for the most part. So anyway, Terrion was the right pick. There's nobody else that the Lions could have had. There's no one else that the Lions could have taken. Especially when you look at the first round, there's no one else that we were going to take. And we can't assume that we could have moved up. I expected a trade up. I was hoping we'd get to 21. And had the Lions got to 21, then you're talking Chop Robinson. You're still 2 places out of Jared Verse. Jared Verse would have been the only edge guy that I wanted. And then you had Quinion Mitchell. So we will never know if Brad is telling us the truth that Terrion was his number 1 corner on his board. We will never know that. We can only take him at his word. But I would say if we got to 21, then we probably would have taken Chop. Turned out to have a really good season. All right, Ennis Rakestraw. This one's going to be quick because why? Well, Ennis didn't play. So, again, this is the hindsight 2020 purview on what happened in Detroit Lions draft last year. So, Ennis Rakestraw, let's see where he was picked. He was picked at pick 29, or I'm sorry, pick 61 overall, pick 29 in the second. And if you look at who was picked ahead of him, you have Cole Bishop, safety from the Buffalo Bills. You had Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia, went to the Green Bay Packers. Marshawn Nealand, another edge rusher guy that a lot of us were high on. Marshawn Nealand was at pick 24. The Lions obviously, were out of that play. We couldn't do anything. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't move to 61, right? That was part of our original pick.
Yeah, I think that was
like one of the only rounds we didn't move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brad Holmes was working extra. He always is, but
Okay,
yes.
so Renardo Green. Did Renardo Green have a better season than, Ennis Rakestraw? Would he have been a better pick?
It's so hard to judge because, like you said, Rakestraw didn't play a ton. There is a good corner that Jacksonville took, Terrion Jones, at pick 96, who ended up having a good season by the end of the year. He finished 33rd in pass breakups with 6. He had 2 sacks, which was 3rd of all corners in the league. But so Terrion Jones was good, but Rakestraw it's just so hard to say because, again, we haven't seen him. I think he only played in 7-8 games.
I don't even know if he played that much, but I do know this. So Renardo Green did play quite a bit. He was targeted 70 times. He had a 62.9% reception rate. He had 9 PBUs. He had a 92.1 passer rating against, and he had 1 interception. So, I mean, for the 49ers, he had a pretty solid season. Stayed healthy. Prior to that pick being made, and a few weeks prior to that, there was an article that came out, some chatter, that the Lions should run in the other direction from Ennis Rakestraw. And I did a video on it. And I was thinking, okay, why are they saying this? Why are they saying run away from Ennis Rakestraw? Everything that I saw from him in training camp, in the times that he got in, preseason, I thought, man, this guy's going to be great in his second season. Right now, he's got a lot to fight to be on the field, right? He's got to go up against Carlton and Amik. He's not going to beat that battle. He's not going to beat out Terrion Arnold. So he's got to beat out 3 guys to make it onto the field. Well, Amik's going to play nickel. I don't think Ennis Rakestraw is really going to be a nickel for us. He's 6 foot, 188. Could he play the position? Sure. But I think we have 2 guys between Brian Branch and Meek Robertson that are going to handle that nickel slot, position. He's going to either be a number 2 or a number 3 corner on this team. Right now, in my opinion, before we even get another number 1 or 2, he's still number 3. I don't think that he's the bona fide starter next year because we haven't seen enough. But when we did see him, his best game was Dallas. But that's not saying much. He was targeted 3 times. He allowed 2 catches. Every time else he was targeted in the season, which was only 2 more times, there wasn't a catch. There was 1 catch. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 1 catch made. So I like his play style. I like his physical and aggressiveness. I like the way that he moves. He's very fluid. He mirror matches well, stays hip to hip, breaks on the ball well, has good instinct, but I haven't seen enough. So I have an incomplete grade for him, obviously, because he only was in a handful of snaps. I mean, he was targeted 5 times. That's not enough. It's not enough. So because of that, and because hindsight is 2020, and that's what we're talking about here, did Brad Holmes make the right pick for this year? Not in 3 years, right? Not in 3 years. Did he make the right pick for this year? The answer is no. He could have taken Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU, offensive tackle. That would have helped us, and then we wouldn't have gotten Giovanni Manu. I'm good with that. I haven't seen Giovanni play yet, and that's the only reason why I'm good with that. Gio might step onto the field this year and just completely wreck everybody, and I hope he does. Renardo Green at pick 32, so 3 slots back, he played an entire season, had a good season. So yeah, I mean, there's other players that Brad could have taken if you back it up to the 3rd round, and you pick somebody a little early, or maybe you trade back. Well, what about Andrew Phillips? Andrew Phillips had a decent season, did he not?
It's so interesting, too, because there was a time, and you make mention of the article there, where it came out saying they should run away from him. There was a time where he was often mocked to the Lions in the 1st round.
Yeah, as the first pick. See, I was always higher on Renardo Green and the guy that you just mentioned a minute ago. I was high on, Jalen Jones. I was high on both those guys. Andrew Phillips had a good season. I mean, 96.1 passer rating against, 82% reception rate, both better than Terrion. He ended up with 1 interception. He didn't have any pass breakups, though, and that's concerning. So that means that he was probably in a lot of zone coverage with the Giants. I'm not for sure, but I'm just going to take that as it is until I would watch some tape. Yeah. But just because he doesn't have a ton of pass breakups would tell me that he's more in a zone. They're catching the ball, and then he's getting to him, especially when you look at yak yards. He gave up 297 yak yards on 41 receptions. So he's given up like 7 yards of yak per catch, which to me spells zone, right? Z-O-N-E. That's what it spells to me. And so these things when you watch tape, right? You know these things when you study these guys, and you can look at a stat and you could say, I know what that means, and then you go watch the tape and it confirms it. All right, how about a linebacker? We really needed a linebacker out of this draft, in my opinion, because if you look at this year, it is the worst position that we are in, is in the linebacker room. Does this mean that this year Brad's going to double down on linebackers? Could be. Very well could be. I wasn't high on Braylon Trice. I wasn't high on Jonah Ellis, but I think Jonah Ellis had a fairly decent season. Would have been nice to see him come home, where his dad played.
Former Ute. I would have loved that, but I'm biased towards Utah players.
Yeah, so Jonah, I mean, he had 20 pressures on the season. He had 6 sacks, 14 quarterback hits.
He would have been awesome.
Now, in coverage, he sucks, but yeah, I mean, he would have been decent, but 6'2", 246. I mean, he's prototypical linebacker size. To me, he's not an edge. He's an outside linebacker, inside linebacker. I don't really know what he played for the Broncos.
What all this does, though, this just makes me, it's funny how like every year I'm like, this is the most excited I've ever been for a football season. This is the most, especially the last couple of years with the Lions having the progress they've had, but I've never been more excited for a draft than I am this year's draft.
And yeah, so his size just confirmed it to me. His depth chart, he's a Sam linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
He's not an edge. I don't know why they have him listed as an edge, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I just was kind of going off on a side tangent there, just how excited I am. This just gets you so excited because now the wheels are turning and you're thinking about, okay, what are they going to do this year? What position are they going to take? What moves are they going to make? I'm damn happy to have Brad Holmes as the GM of the Lions. I'll say that for sure. I think we all are.
And I think that this exercise helps confirm a lot of that too, because there is not a better player that you can say, unless you're willing to really stack the offensive line. Okay, that could have been a move in the first round. But had you have done that, you really would have been hurting to find another number one corner. Brad said it himself. He thinks that he's really good at evaluating corners. He wanted to get one of the last guys that was training under Nick Saban. Nick Saban has produced some of the best corners to ever play the game. And I think that's why he finally pulled the trigger on it. But in years past, he had opportunity. He did. He could have moved up one step for Devon Witherspoon. He could have. It would have cost him probably a little bit more than he wanted to pay. That's why I know Brad is not an F them picks kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say it again. There's going to be some interesting changes to this roster. I do believe that there's going to be one high-profile trade. See anybody else in the second round that I would have taken that you're not down in the... I mean, you're down in pick 12. You're at pick 76, so you'd have gone from 61 to 76 to taking Jonah Ellis. And yeah, that probably would have been a good pick, but he was terrible in coverage, and we were already terrible in coverage. But he was able to blitz the quarterback. He was able to get to the quarterback. And again, hindsight 2020, all the injuries that we had, who would he have replaced this year? Who would have not made the roster? I think that they were fairly settled with who they were going to war with this year. And Malcolm Rodriguez would have been the only one that I think that would have been on the outs if they would have brought in a guy like Jonah. So again, you'd have to go deep, trade away your pick, and settle for third rounders. Maybe they pick up a couple of picks. I don't know. The other guy that I really liked for defensive tackle was Dwayne Carter. Now, he's at the end of the second round, though. That's a big reach, right? You're missing out on a lot. But again, there's not a lot between him, and he had a terrible season. He didn't play a whole lot. He's always had some injury issues. I believe he played for Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. He's from Kentucky.
He went to Duke.
Was it Duke? Okay, so yeah, arch nemesis there. But I did like his tape. And then Jalix Hunt, he was another one that was high on my list out of Houston Christian. Now, he went 94 overall. And matter of fact, where's the Lions pick?
I don't think they are you looking for the third round pick for the Lions?
Yeah.
I don't think they had one.
I thought we moved back into the third last year. I thought we did.
No, I think they lost that in the Carlton trade, I believe, right?
Yeah, but I thought we moved back up. Okay, Jalix Hunt. So he was someone that was high on my list. He had a fairly decent season. Sacks. He only had 3. As far as snaps, he had 320. So he played roughly a third of a season. But we could have used somebody that was 6'4", 248. And if you look at, who the Eagles are utilizing right now, and you look at the Eagles depth chart, man, they're just kind of loaded. I like Jalix Hunt. He didn't have the greatest mock-ups, but I want to say, if I remember correctly, his combine was one of the better combines, if I remember correctly. I could be totally wrong, because I mocked a lot of guys. Jalix Hunt, he's definitely playing edge. He's behind Josh Sweat, according to the Eagles official depth chart, I wouldn't have had him as an edge. I probably would have had him as an outside linebacker, but his movement skills have to be there. But then again, the Eagles only have 2 linebackers listed on their depth chart. I don't know why. They only have 2 linebacker positions listed, and that's probably because they're in a 4-2-5 base. Makes sense. They're in a 4-2-5 base. So, yeah, they have Nolan Smith Jr. listed as an edge. So they and Bryce Huff. So obviously they like the smaller, speedy edge guys, not the bigger edge guys. So anyway, that's my take on Ennis Rakestraw. Look, it's too little too soon, right? We don't know enough. Too small of a sample size. You'll have to see more. I can only hope that he stays healthy in 2025 and beyond, and we get to see a lot more out of him this year.
You can do it!